Night Vision. Following clues left by our ancestors, we unbury the past to reveal a knowledge of unfathomable value, putting us just a little closer to our own true birthrights. From the secret history of a possible bloodline of Jesus Christ, the secret history of America's founders, to the secret history of extraterrestrial interaction on our planet, here to bring light to the night. Your host for Night Vision Radio, Renee Barnett.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Night Vision, or if this is your first time joining us, welcome to Night Vision. I am your host, Renee Barnett, and we've got a great show planned for tonight. Really interesting stuff. We're going to be talking about shapeshifters, everything from ancient cultures all the way up to today, when some people think that there are shapeshifters or shape-shifting reptilians walking among us today, largely thanks to the theories and philosophies of a gentleman called David Icke. We're going to get into that. I think we're probably going to start somewhere a little bit earlier than that in the chronology, but we'll definitely get that in because I know a lot of you people are interested in hearing what we might have to say, especially my guest tonight. John Kachuba is an award-winning author, and he's a creative writing instructor at Ohio University. And I also found out, I was going to say a little secret, but I guess it's not really a secret since it's on the back cover of his book, the inside cover, that John is also an avid ghost hunter or paranormal investigator. So we're going to maybe twist his arm a little bit and get him to talk about some of the sites that he's been to. And I wonder if there's a crossover between some haunted sites and some of the shapeshifters. We'll find out. So let's welcome John. Hey, John, how are you?
Hi, Renee. How are you?
I'm so happy that you could join us, and I appreciate you rescheduling. I had a family emergency. You were supposed to come on a couple weeks back, and there was a sudden death in my extended family. So I do appreciate you being kind enough to reschedule and come back on with me.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. When I think of shapeshifters, the first thing that comes to my mind is I was born and raised in southeastern Oklahoma, and right in the middle of Native America, of course. And, we had several tribes that were headquartered right around where I grew up. But in Oklahoma, at large, there are about 39 tribes that are headquartered in Oklahoma, and I think it's around 120 others that are represented there. So I was surrounded by Native American culture such that I really didn't realize, what was Native American and what wasn't, because that was around us as we grew up. But in high school, I had a boyfriend whose grandmother was Choctaw Indian, and we used to go out to her little house out in the woods to visit her. And she would always tell us stories about shapeshifters. And she told us about this one woman that was said that you would see her. It was a local woman. You would see her walking down the road, and you would pass by her in your car. And then 15 minutes later, you'd pass her again. She somehow got there. And so it was rumored that she could turn herself into a bird and fly there. And the same story was told in the biggest murder case ever in Oklahoma history, where the suspect was a Cherokee Indian, and he was also a medicine man in training, and he lived with a very powerful medicine man. And the stories that the investigators told about tracking him right out into the middle of a field, with tracking dogs, and then suddenly he's just gone. They just lose their scent. And other stories about animals like jumping out at them that just didn't seem normal. And so they were thinking maybe he was turning himself into those. So it's kind of a familiar subject to me, but you are an expert in all things shape shifting. So I'm so glad to have you. We usually cover twisted history. I'm wondering if this is shifted history we're covering tonight. But what got you into this particular subject? It sounds like you have an all-around interest in sort of the unusual.
Yeah, well, and actually one of my subjects of interest too that I've written about too is also Native American culture and history. So that's in there too a little bit.
Yes.
But for me, you mentioned earlier that I'm a paranormal investigator, and I do have several books out about ghosts and hauntings. And that's sort of what brought the shape-shifting entity, if you will, to the front for me, because as I go around giving public talks about ghosts and ghost hunting, so often people would tell me their stories. And a lot of times I would hear a story where they would describe something that I would say, that doesn't really seem like a ghost to me. Why not? Well, because you're talking about something sort of maybe transforming or seeing shapes that change into something else. So I became aware of what seemed like more shape-shifting stories in a way, or encounters. So I started doing a little research into just the shapeshifter character itself. And that's when I found out that, that particular character has been present in almost every culture around the world. And from ancient times and prehistoric times right up until today. In fact, I sent you a little bit earlier a drawing of a cave drawing that appeared in a cave in France, and it dates from the Neolithic period. There you go. Yeah. And what's interesting about this thing is if you take a look at it, what it looks like is a deer or probably a deer, reindeer, or something like that, right. Elk maybe, right? Standing on its hind legs. But if you look at it really closely, you'll notice that it doesn't have hooves like reindeer or deer or elks do. But look at the front paws.
Yeah, and even the back feet.
Yeah, right. There's fingers and toes, yeah. Which, as far as we know, deer don't have those, right? And if you look at the eyes as well, they're front forward like humans, rather than to the side of the head like deer and elk and all that. So what anthropologists think that this picture depicts is a shaman transforming himself into we'll just call it a deer. I don't know what else it would be, but they think it's, that it's transforming into a deer. So what they're speculating on is that this may have not have been an actual transformation, right? But that it would have been what they call hunter magic or hunter ritual magic, right? So a shaman would have gotten the hunters of the tribe together, and they would say, okay, we're going to go out and hunt deer. So there would be all kinds of, chanting and whatever, probably also the ingestion of natural hallucinogenics from the environment, magic mushrooms, as we say.
Cloaking themselves in deer skin or something like that.
The whole thing, dressing, putting the pelts on, the hides on, the whole bit, and getting themselves into that state where they literally believe that they are the animal.
I think I copied a picture of a medicine man doing that very thing here.
Yeah.
In his
and so the idea was that, if you could become the animal, and believe you become the animal, you probably even, you'd walk like the animal, you try to imitate the animal. And if you're wearing the hides and everything else, you could probably actually get pretty close to your prey. I know Native Americans hunting buffalo frequently would wear a buffalo hide, and they weren't necessarily in any kind of trance state, but they would get up close to the bison because they're wearing the horns and everything else, and then they, go after them. So it's a different kind of shapeshifter in that it's not a physical transformation, but for all practical purposes, those people involved believed that they had transformed. So in my book, I talk about what I call internal and external shapeshifters. And the external ones are the ones that physically go through some transformation, like a werewolf.
Right.
You know, suddenly you break out into claws and fur and fangs and everything else, right? But the internal one is where it happens internally, psychologically, mentally. You believe you transformed into some beast of some kind. When people look at you and they don't see any difference, but you know it, you feel it. And the funny thing is, I've noticed that is pretty common among, you talked about Native American peoples, and that certainly you see it there. But in my research, it seems like indigenous people all around the world have that sort of ability, if you will, to put themselves in the place of an animal, or to imagine, literally become an animal mentally, psychologically. And a lot of it has to do with hunting. But I think also it's just because indigenous people are so much closer to the natural world than we are.
Yeah. That's just what I was
not a dog, but
we're closer to nature. They relate to nature much better than most people do. Right. So I can see how they would be able to more easily go through a process like that is authentic to them. But now, so that cave painting that you put up, now, when do you reckon that was done?
They date it from the Neolithic period. So, I mean, it's thousands and thousands of years old. They don't have an exact date, but you're talking prehistory, prehistoric record here.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. I consider that maybe possibly the first depiction of a shapeshifter ever, and it goes back.
That's so amazing.
So ancient,
Yeah, yeah, that is so amazing. And then it is, and I know you mentioned this in your book, and it's so true. People are so captivated with the idea of shapeshifters, and it's like I think you said it's something like our secret desire to be able to do amazing things, or to be different, or even have superhuman powers or something like that. Mm-hmm. But do you know if there is evidence that says to you, hey, this thing really happened? This wasn't just a spiritual practice or ritual, but that something very physical went on here.
Right. Well, I can't say that, personally in my experience that I've seen that or witnessed that, but in the book, there are a lot of examples of people in different places who have experienced an encounter with a shapeshifter, or something they believe to be a shapeshifter, where they have seen somebody literally transform, and become something else. Does that, how do you explain that? Like I said, I wasn't there. I'm getting this from newspaper accounts, from whatever, different books and things like that, where people have talked about this. Does it happen? Well, it seems like there's a record of events like that, but again, it's kind of like UFOs. People say, well, they're out there, we see them, but can you prove anything?
Exactly. Yet there's so many anecdotal reports, but it's like, I'm always just wishing for that solid confirmation personally, that I want to see it. I want to experience it. And then I'll know for sure. It's not that I'm not believing people. It's just that, my analytical brain, which is my probably biggest enemy, starts trying to overthink it. And okay, what could be the rational explanation for this? And, all that. And pretty soon I've talked myself out of thinking, oh, they're telling me what they believe, but they're just wrong, or maybe they don't know. And so I would love to be that person that sees the UFO, that, has the Bigfoot encounter. That now I don't know if I'd want to encounter a werewolf or a demon or anything like that.
Yeah.
You want to run into a few demons in your haunted house investigation.
Well, there's been a few, yeah. So, but the thing is, like I say, we can't prove that, and yet there are incidents and records that make you think, well, what's happening? If you think about somebody physically transforming, a human, you, me, transforming into an animal, I mean, just rationally, logically, you say, well, that's impossible. It's ludicrous. You're crazy to think that, right? But there are examples. And even in my book, I mentioned a couple of things. I mentioned the Bible, for instance. I talk about the Bible, which sometimes gets me in a little hot water with some people who think that I'm being very sacrilegious, but I'm simply reporting what's in the Bible. And there's the book of Daniel, the Old Testament, talks about King Nebuchadnezzar, who gets on the wrong side of God for whatever reason. The next thing you know, he's transformed into a beast of some kind. They call it a beast. They don't really name it, but they say things like it had claws, feathers. So I'm not sure, a bird maybe, but then they said it went around on all fours and ate the grass, kind of like a cow. So we don't know what it was for sure. But here's the Bible saying that. Now, if you take the Bible literally, which personally I don't, but there are people that do, what do you do with that, right?
Right.
Then you go to the New Testament, and there's a theologian, and his name escapes me, but it's in the book, and this is the book, by the way, in case anybody's wanted the book. I love the cover on that thing.
My copy.
So.
Put it up right there.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
So there's a theologian from the University of Utrecht, I think, in the Netherlands, and he talks about his translation of a Coptic text that is in the Morgan Library. It's ancient, and it talks about his interpretation of this is that it's part of a biblical passage, and it relates to the scene in the New Testament where Judas is going to betray Jesus. And so he goes to the Jews and he says, I'll deliver him to you. He'll be in the garden tonight with his disciples. I'll point him out to you and say, that's the guy, right? And they say, this is according to the translation that this theologian has found. They say, well, how will we know him? And because when we have seen him, when we've heard about him, he appears in different ways. And I'm paraphrasing this, obviously. The translation is in the book.
Right? I remember that now.
Yeah. They say sometimes he appears white. Sometimes he appears, they say ruddy, which would be like a red color. Sometimes they say he looks old. He looks young. So they're giving all these different ways of this is the way he appears. So we don't know him. You need to point him out to us because we won't be able to recognize him. So what is that? You could say, well, that's metaphorical. And it could be a metaphor, meaning that Jesus preached to everybody, and each person, no matter whether they're young, old, black, white, yellow, whatever, heard him in a different way and saw him. You could say that. Or you can say, well, they're strictly asking because he was changing all the time, depending on who he was talking to. And there's other examples in there, like the Transfiguration, for instance. When Jesus goes up to a mountain and he tells his disciples, you stay below, you stay below. I'm going to go up to this mountain. You just pray. And he goes up there and he turns into, for lack of a better word, sort of this kind of glorious light being. He's dazzling, right? The disciples, the Bible say, they shielded his eyes. They couldn't even look. He was so bright. And then he comes back down and he's like, well, just the way he was before. So what is that? And by the way, the Buddha, at least twice in his life, had a similar transfiguration as Jesus did. So you think, well, so are they really shifting? Are they really doing this? And I got in a little hot water with a Catholic journal.
Are there others that have done the same? Like, what about Muhammad?
I don't know for sure, but it's interesting that two holy men.
It is.
Had that. Yeah. So I don't know. It'd be an interesting topic to look at, the life of different saints, no matter what the religion is, but different holy people, to see if they've had those kinds of things. I mean, you hear about levitation and that kind of thing from holy people.
Yeah.
So Maybe. I don't know.
Very,
But
very.
so there it is. So, what is that? Is that proof? Well, no, it's not proof really. If you're a firm Bible believer, yeah, it is proof. I would say it's proof. But there's examples like that, and then just modern ones. I mean, I was pulling examples out of the New York Times from the 1990s and even 2000 of examples where people were seeing what they thought were werewolves, like in India, a case where in the state of Uttar Pradesh in India, there was something like 33 children that disappeared. And this was, I'm trying to think of the year, I want to say 1996, but it was modern times for sure. And this was reported in the New York Times. I mean, a reporter was out there in India talking to people, interviewing them. And they were saying that there was some kind of, they called it a man wolf, not a wolf man, but a man wolf. They said that they were seeing that this is what they saw. And they interviewed, the reporter interviewed a girl who was about 14 years old. And she said that she saw a man wolf. And there you go. She saw this thing grab her little brother, who was like 4 or 5. And this was interesting. She said, throw him over its shoulder and run off on 2 legs.
Wow.
Well, I don't know any wolf that can do that. A man can do that. Could a man wolf do that? Something in between, right?
Yeah.
And it was incredible because people were so alarmed by this. I mean, these children were disappearing and all this. And what happened was basically mob violence. Some vigilantes started accusing people of being sorcerers and witches, and they lynched, I think, something like 12 people who they said were responsible for this. And meanwhile, these disappearances continued. And then just like that, they stopped. Just at one point, they just stopped, and no one knows what. But in those interviews in the New York Times, they interviewed a guy who was a truck driver. And he said that the government wants us to say that it was a wolf. He said, but we know that it was a man wolf. Very,
Whoa.
And these are people that were there,
Okay.
that saw this. I mean, this girl saw her brother snatched by whatever it was.
Did she get him back?
No, he was, there was like 33 children that, disappeared. And just,
oh my God. Oh my gosh. I did a documentary several years ago on Bigfoot. My other job is television producing and film producing. And I went down in southeastern Oklahoma, where I grew up, and interviewed so many people. And it's like you say, it's like, I still didn't see it myself, but I totally believed these people, that were telling these stories because they had nothing to gain. And a lot of them were very reluctant to speak to me. And some wouldn't go on camera, and others, I just bugged them long enough until they finally did, because they had been the subject of ridicule and everything. But when they told me their stories, it's just like there was a nurse, there was a truck driver, there was a high school track coach, there was a banker. So it's like all walks of life, in telling these stories about these encounters down in that area. And is that proof? No. But gosh, I came away from there thinking they saw something, you know.
Yeah.
And then, also meeting with the Native Americans and hearing what they have to say about the Bigfoot creatures, And we were sitting with an old medicine man named Kennedy Wise, Seminole medicine man. And he said, they're just another tribe. So we don't bother them, and they don't bother us. They're just another tribe. They walk down the rivers. Okay, they'll accept them. But they also had like interesting features. They could be invisible. They can make themselves invisible, according to the Native Americans. And they can also make you forget that you ever saw them. In fact, one of the names that the Seminoles use for Bigfoot is Ihoza, which means make you forget.
Hmm.
And they say, you'll see him, but you won't remember.
No.
Very interesting stuff. But
well, you know, when I was doing a lot of my ghost research, I mean, I interviewed hundreds of people for my books, places that were haunted. And like you said, I've interviewed same type of people, you know, police officers, I mean, clerics, priests, nuns. And I'm thinking, well, you know, especially religious people like a nun or a priest, they're not supposed to lie to you. So, you know, I can only say if they had an experience. Yeah.
Not only that, I can't imagine that being something, if they were going to make something up, I don't think it would be something that could, you know, others might find sacrilegious or, you know, controversial. Like, you know, nuns don't usually get real controversial.
Right.
So if they're going to tell a story like that, I would think there's some basis there. You know, they're pretty good. And like you said, police officers and pilots, you know, who've seen things in the skies.
Right.
There are people that just seem to be credible witnesses, you know, and I saw a lot of those. I totally know that they weren't lying. You know, what they saw and what happened to them, you know, I can only speculate, but I do accept that they're telling me the truth as they saw it. But yeah. So is there any kind of, I know this is an off the wall question, but is there any kind of relationship? Because you hear about this whole Bigfoot and UFO connection. Mm-hmm. Is there a shape-shifting and UFO connection? Or has that been an aspect that's ever come up in your researches?
I think the only connection that I can think of is when you mentioned David Icke earlier.
Oh, yeah.
And, you know, his whole thing was that millions of years ago, some alien race, reptilian aliens, came to Earth. So there would have been obviously some way of coming, UFOs, you know, whatever you call it, but they somehow came to Earth. And when they came here, they mated with the sort of proto-humans that were running around on the planet at that point, whatever they were, and created this strain of DNA that was half reptilian alien and half human, and that's been passed down. And that today there are people among us who, according to Icke, are reptilian alien shapeshifters, are able to transform between their human nature and some type of reptilian alien. I had a drawing of that. I think I may have sent you a picture of that, but it was just an artist's rendering of what he thought a reptilian alien would look like, you know.
Oh, yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. Here's my reptilian.
And there you go. I love that drawing. It's just that is what I would like to see.
Well done. Now, I was going to ask you, you know, how do I know if I'm a reptilian? But I guess if I was, I guess I'd know that I could shapeshift, and I can't seem to pull that off. So maybe I'm not one. I don't know.
Well, there's a bunch of YouTube videos, and you've probably seen them, where they zero in on somebody's eyes.
Yes.
And they look like a snake's eyes with the pupil going vertical instead of, you know. And I mean, I kind of laugh at those because there's a whole lot of photoshopping and kind of, well, you know, all kinds of manipulation you can do on. I don't buy them.
No.
But I mean, I would say that that's proof, you know, of the fact that there are reptilian aliens among us, according to him. And he has millions of people that read his newsletter about reptilian aliens.
And I know people that firmly believe it, you know, and I don't know. I have a bit of a problem when, you know, people are spreading things that they don't really know and scaring a lot of people.
Right.
You know, I feel like there's really something disingenuous in that, and, you know, got a little bit of an issue with Mr. Icke in that respect. I worked on the TV show Conspiracy Theory with Jesse Ventura, and we did a thing on David Icke. It really, honestly, wasn't the best episode we did because I'm not sure, it kind of came off a little weak at the end. But Jesse, how he always went and confronted people, and he did confront David Icke, but it was very watered down and stuff. And I don't know why that was, but during the course of that production, I knew about David Icke for years and years, but I got it more into his work and his theories and what he was putting out. And of course, looked at 1 million of those videos with people's eyes looking like they're slit and things like that. And I just feel it's not right. I just feel it's not that there's nothing at all to it. And that's the thing. I think a lot of times with misinformation and disinformation, there is something there, but then they glom on other things. I don't know what your opinion is on David Icke's theories, or if you even want to share them. But that's sort of where I stand, and I know I'm an old fuddy-duddy.
I try to look for logic and some proof, behind things. And quite honestly, from what I've read of Icke, I don't see anything there to substantiate pretty much anything. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. The reptilian alien shapeshifting theory, as we're talking about, isn't even really a theory. It's just, he has a name for the star system where they came from and everything else. But there's no way of verifying any of that, just none of it. So,
I mean, do you have an opinion on why so many people do believe that?
I don't know. I mean, I know in other things.
Is it exciting? Is it like being part of a group that's fighting against something together? Or
I think there's part of that. There's probably part of that. I mean, there's always sort of fringe groups that, whether it's political or social or something, that have some far out conspiracy theories or some far out ideas. But you get together as a group and you support each other, and it may be that there's something lacking in your life that maybe this answers. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to say.
I could understand, a lot of people, maybe feeling like they have a lack of purpose, or, something's going on in their life that's not quite right. They may be suffering in some area. Yeah. And this is something that they can kind of latch onto as almost a distraction. But, and as again, not to say that there's absolutely nothing to the theories. I mean, I'm no biology expert, but I do know that we have something called the reptilian brain,
Right.
So, maybe there's something to all that. And I'm not absolutely against the idea that there were those coming here before humans were as we are now, and intermingling and intermixing. I'm not, I think that, the idea that we're alone in this universe is very naive and arrogant. I mean, we're just a tiny little planet in really a relatively small solar system and galaxy compared to what's out there. We don't even know,
Right. No, that's true.
But there are other much more giant galaxies. And why would this be the only one where sentient life developed? It just doesn't really make sense. Now, whether or not that particular story is true, that they were some kind of, reptilian looking type people, or whether they had some kind of, reptilian DNA. Do you know how that DNA is supposed to be identified? Like, I've had my DNA test done, and they put it out, Scottish, Irish, but they didn't list reptilian.
There was no lizard in there, no iguana, nothing like that.
Nothing like that. Not even
chameleon.
a million.
No, I don't know. It's interesting. I don't. Yeah, I don't know what they would identify that you would think. That's what I means when I say I'm looking for some proof. I agree with you about the idea that we are certainly not alone in the universe. It's impossible that we're alone in the universe. I mean, it's just impossible.
Yeah.
But getting back to this thing about the DNA, we have people that study DNA all the time, and no one has ever said, "Wait a minute, what's this little part here? Looks like a frog," or I mean, no, that hasn't happened. We have DNA pretty much mapped out. We know what it is, So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's not my field either.
It is interesting, to look into all these things. And but I've met people who believed that they were a reptilian and that they could shapeshift, and they had people, that they were in relationships with or whatever that said they saw it.
Yeah.
I never saw it, and I don't know. It's a mystery. It's just a mystery.
Well, and there have been people in history, not so much reptilian aliens, but who have believed that they have transformed, and forget the idea of hallucinogenics or anything else. They just actually believe that they are something else. I have a couple examples in the book about people who believe that they had turned into werewolves, that they had turned into wolves, and acted out accordingly, actually murdering people, killing them, eating, tearing the corpses apart and eating them like a wolf. These people, were suffering from lycanthropy. I mean, a literal medical condition.
Yes.
That people think they're wolves. How does that even happen? Nothing happens to them physically. As I said, you look at them, they look just like you and me, but they're out eating people, which I haven't done that in a long time.
No, I tried to quit.
Good. Yeah. It goes right to my waist. Then.
Exactly. Oh my goodness. Now, do you have a particular legend or story or instance of shape-shifting that you find you're most drawn to, that you think, that's my favorite shapeshifter?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I do like the werewolf character generally. And I think probably why I like it so much is because it's so prevalent when you talk about shapeshifters. It's in a lot of European cultures. There's also werewolves in other, like Middle Eastern and things like that, where people shift into wolves or some kind of a canine, something similar, And I wonder what fascinates me about that is trying to determine where the origin of that comes from. Why is it, if people can shapeshift, why is there shapeshifting into wolves primarily and not into, bobcats or something else? I don't know. And so I started thinking about the fact that, canines were the first animals that we domesticated, right? Thousands and thousands of years ago. We took what was a wild wolf of some kind and gradually domesticated it, and dogs, chihuahuas, whatever, evolved from these wolves. So I guess what I'm saying is that we had man and wolf always had a very close relationship going way, way, way back. And first it was a relationship where mankind had to be in fear of wolf, right? Wolf packs would be out there, and you were running around and, with little protection and no weapons. I mean, you're, kind of I don't want to say prehistoric, but an ancient person being preyed upon by wolf pack, and then you gradually figure out a way to, I don't know, sort of make ends meet and find a way to domesticate that animal that was formerly preying on you. And now it's pulling a dog sled for you. So there's some real strong connection between humans and the canines, canines generally. And I wonder if that's not almost ingrained in our nature in a sense. I mean, why are so many people dog lovers?
Right.
I don't know.
No.
you know. So it could very well be that there's something there.
Most Native American cultures that I know of, and you may know about more than I do, but the wolf is always like a sort of a sacred animal, you know, a spirit animal.
Right. Wolf, coyote, which is, also a canine. That too. So, yeah.
But someone says, I like that link, but I would rather be a cat. You know what? Where I grew up, and to this day, there are still reports of this giant black cat, like a panther, that roamed around the countryside in Oklahoma. And I've heard about that my whole life. And somebody just mentioned it not that long ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, to me that, there's still reports coming in about these giant. And somebody got a picture of one time, and it was pretty compelling. Now, whether or not they were able to do something on Photoshop, I don't know, but it looked real.
Yeah.
But, so are there stories of cats?
Well, I can't say that I've come across so many, not so much the small cat, that you have in your lap, but certainly in Africa, big cats, lions, leopards. There are stories about, again, shamans.
That put the leopard skins and
Right.
That's true.
Right. Especially like I talk about the Bushmen, the Bushmen of the desert there, and they talk about transforming into lions and tigers, and some very interesting accounts, descriptions of how they do it. I have some not firsthand experience, but firsthand testimony from some of these people that's in the book about what it feels like to transform. And they say, I know I'm there, and I can feel the claws, and I can feel the teeth, and I know I'm a lion. It's amazing. But that makes sense, because it's a powerful animal. And if you are a shaman, you're looking for power, probably. Right. And that's one way to get it, to be that kind of powerful animal.
But so even though people looking at them can't see the claws, they feel them.
Yeah.
Or they say that people can actually see them.
Right. No. If you're looking at the person, he would just, again, look normal.
Yeah.
The Bushman would say, I know, I can feel it. I can feel the lion inside me. But not only that, I can see as a lion. I could look at myself and I'm a lion, but nobody else sees that. So again, it's what I would call internal.
It's so powerful, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's similar in some ways to, I've known, amputees who still feel pain in the foot that's not there anymore.
Right.
So
phantom pain.
Yeah.
Right.
I wonder if it's a little part and parcel of that same thing, that your mind can actually, create that for you.
Well, so I wrote in my book about a man up here in Northern Ohio named Guy Savelli. And there was a book that came out several years ago. I may not have the title exactly right, but it's something about men that stare at goats or something like that. And it was turned into a movie as well.
Yeah.
And it was this whole program at the Army, the secret Army. The Army.
We had some of those guys on this show.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So, mind control and being able to knock down people and everything with your mind, right? Mm-hmm. Well, Guy Savelli is a martial arts expert, and also I'll call him a mentalist, for lack of a better word. But he has trained a lot of Navy SEALs and different kind of, SEAL teams and things like that, as well as apparently the guys that were in this book. That Savelli, this guy that trained them. And they did a test with him where there was a goat in a yard somewhere or whatever, a field or something. And he was in a kind of a room where had no windows or anything else like that, couldn't see the goat, but he concentrated on the goat. And the goat was about 50 yards away. And the idea was to see if he can knock the goat down.
Yeah.
And he's concentrating. And next thing you know, the goat gets knocked down in the field 50 yards away, right? But Savelli also may be kind of a shapeshifter. And this is kind of interesting. Like I said, he teaches martial arts and a lot of this mind control thing. And one of his students was with him. They went into a bar someplace, and some guy was drunk, typical loudmouth drunk. And he just comes up to Guy Savelli and for whatever reason, just starts picking on him. Like, oh, you want to go a couple, let's go, for no reason, right? So the student is standing back going, I don't want anything to do with this. And Guy Savelli doesn't say a word, but he just stands there and he looks at the guy. And he just looks at him. And according to the student who was standing there watching this thing, he said, the next thing I know is this big drunk guy, like the blood drains from his face. He just gets white and his eyes open wide. And he just kind of goes like this, hey, all right, man. And he backs off. He just backs off and he literally runs out of the bar, right? And he said, all I can say is when I saw Guy Savelli's face, this is the student again, he said, it wasn't Guy anymore. He said, what I saw was I saw a tiger. And I said, what do you mean you saw a tiger? He said, I don't know how I saw a tiger. I don't know how to explain it. There was a tiger. Guy Savelli's face was a tiger. And I think of like Eye of the Tiger and all this kind of stuff, which was sort of a mental martial arts thing and everything. But he said, yeah, then Savelli just turns around and everything was fine. So, what did Guy Savelli do? I mean, if this drunk did see a tiger facing him, well, yeah, he's going to back off and run out, right? Yeah. But nobody else saw that. And the only thing the student saw was what he said was he saw the face of a tiger. And he wasn't even that clear. He couldn't even say to me, well, orange and black and, it looked like a tiger. No, he said, but I knew it was a tiger. There was something. He knew. So somehow a guy was putting out this vibe or this impression mentally.
To project that.
Yeah, to project onto other people who would see him that way, which was different than the Bushman that we were talking about. Who don't project that.
In Guy Savelli, he had that training, like the guys in the film, or you just think he might have?
Because he was a martial arts expert. And I forgot what type of martial arts. I had never heard of it. It was a pretty obscure form. He became a master in it. And it had to do a lot of martial arts has to do with, sort of mind control in a sense. But this was really kind of mind control. I mean, yes, it was physical. He used his hands and feet, but it was also a lot of mental exertion behind that. And so, when he worked with Special Forces and Navy SEALs and all these types of people, and he trained them in this form of martial arts, but also a little bit further in sort of, I don't want to call it mind control. I don't know what to call it, but I guess for lack of a better word, being able to use your mind in ways that most of us can't, And again, I wonder if that isn't something that a shapeshifter is capable of. Somehow projecting, even without physically changing into something that you see.
Well, I know I've had Lynn Buchanan, who was one of the original remote viewers in that program for the U.S. military. I've known Lynn for, decades now. And he said, that they not only were trained to remote view, but also to remote influence.
Okay.
So he might have been doing some kind of influencing there.
Yeah.
To make the guy perceive that he was in danger if he carried on acting like a jerk.
Right.
Something like that.
And I wonder too, if we don't all have that ability. I mean,
I'm sure we do.
Because we can influence somebody to do something, right? Or we can get somebody to do something somehow. Yeah. But I think, can you ratchet it up? Can you learn how to take it up to the next level where you can have a tiger face or whatever you need to do?
Yeah. The training, I've thought about it a lot. I am the most undisciplined person in the universe, and you really have to be disciplined to to train under the same protocols that that Lynn used. We have another friend who's been on this show a couple of times named Lori Williams, and she was one of Lynn's star students. So she's got a company called Intuitive Specialists, I think, intuitivespecialist.com. And they teach, she teaches, on Zoom classes and also in person. And she uses the same exact protocols that were used by the U.S. military. So, it can be done. And I've had friends that have done it and done really well at it. But I also see how much they had to devote. And probably it's different from person to person, because there are people like, that already just kind of know stuff. They kind of sense things and are very intuitive. And I think sometimes that can put you a little further down the road. But also, I think what they usually say is forget everything you know so far about, being psychic and intuition, because, you're going to forget that and follow these protocols. And they've come across with some amazing results. We had them on last Halloween, I guess, or no, it was a few months before that, where I did a show on Lizzie Borden, and it was a live stream event where we were at the Lizzie Borden murder house and had ghost hunters and everything, and we utilized some of that same things. Oh, good. Do you mind taking a couple of quick questions?
Sure.
From the chat room. Oh, one person, where did I lose her? They're going so fast now. But she was asking, what do you have to say about Egyptians worshiping cats? I know we had the Anubis, which is like
right. I mean,
a dog.
Right. I mean, that's interesting because cats do figure a lot in Egyptian hieroglyphics and everything else, and certainly in the god category. I talked a little bit about Egypt in the book and about the fact that a lot of the forms that you see Egyptian gods and goddesses taking were what they call therianthropic, which meant that they didn't really shift, but they were sort of half and half. So you had Anubis actually has the head of a jackal, right, with the body of a person. You have a Taweret, which is an interesting one. She has I'm trying to visualize it. She has the tail end of a alligator or crocodile for Egypt. She has a torso of a woman and the head of a hippo.
There's the cow. And her name's escaping.
Yeah,
she's very major.
I drawn a blank on it myself. Right, she has the cow ears. Right.
Yeah.
It'll come to me later, but yeah. Wow. So a lot of the gods are like that, and the Egyptians believed that was the form. And so when you see these like statues of cats or urns or anything else like that, whether it's cat or whether it's a jackal or it's Anubis, they believe that when the gods and goddesses came to Earth, that they would come down into those vessels, those statues, those vases, those, whatever representation of the god was there, so that he would actually be living there in that form. But I don't know much more about the cats other than I try to think which one there's a cat, and I can't think of the name of. There's a ton of Egyptian gods and goddesses.
Yeah.
But
you do see depictions of cats a lot.
Yeah.
And it was Hathor.
Hathor, yeah.
I'd like to say I remembered it on my own, but I looked it up.
It's all right.
And Ojo says, in some mystical traditions, humans can shapeshift into animals like a hog to gain wealth. This magic practice is called Babi Gepet. I'm not sure what that is, but that's interesting. Like you would shift into an animal that provides what it is you're, wanting. Like if you're looking for wealth, you change yourself into a hog.
Okay.
That's interesting. I'd like to know more
Yeah,
about it.
I'm gonna look that up. That's a new one on me.
But so I think I've covered a lot of them. A lot of them are just referring to what we were talking about at that moment, and just like
Sure.
comments, not questions. Was the Sphinx originally a lion? American Road Warrior. Hey, American Road Warrior, welcome back.
Well, it has the body of a lion, but it does have a human head, though.
Yeah.
So
Now,
again, the theory is the anthropic form.
Haven't they just discovered that there was a sort of like an earlier form underneath? It seems like there was something significant about this.
Yeah, there was. What was
discovered recently. We'll have to look into that and bring that back in. But oh my goodness, it's almost time for a break. So I guess we'll get into all the other things. I'm really interested in, so many things, the fairies, and because I think that's interesting. And that also reminds me of the Native American little people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Except the little people are kind of ornery. It's like you don't want to mess with them. I don't know about the fairies. Maybe they're.
There's some pretty ornery fairies too.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll have to get into that. Yeah. I guess no Tinkerbell for us. But anyway, it looks like it's just about to flip over into time for a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk more with John Kachuba about shapeshifters. And hopefully we'll get into some haunted places and find out what he thinks the most haunted places are he's been. So stay with us and we'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Ratherby Squidding, co-host at the Unidentified Celebrity Review. The holidays can be a quiet time for news. Not so for the UFO topic. Whether the powers that be are trying to hide developments within the holiday hubbub, or it's just coincidence, we seem to get big news drops and UFO legislation around this time. And this Thanksgiving, there was extra heat added to the topic. As Congress discussed plans for one governmental UFO program, the Pentagon announced the formation of another. Will the formation of the latter convince Congress that the former is not needed? Can the programs coexist? Do they compete or cooperate? There is a lot up in the air, and we have our eyes on it all. You can catch us here on KGRA-DB live Fridays at 1 p.m. Pacific, and live on YouTube at the Unidentified Celebrity Review, Monday through Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific. And catch us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. at the Singularity Lab. Times do occasionally change, so subscribe and ring that notification bell on YouTube. You can also find us on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm hoping that the UFO community has something to celebrate come Christmas. Perhaps, like most developments in this realm, we'll get more new questions rather than answers, but often these new questions can shed new light on old topics. Case in point, Santa Claus. As we consider the extreme possibilities behind UAP, such as interdimensional beings, it makes the fantastical abilities of mythical creatures like Santa Claus plausible. You likely gave up your own belief or never held it, thinking that an entity that was always watching everyone and could visit every household in a single night, impossible. But if you consider interdimensional entities a possible explanation for UFOs, you might have to rethink your disbelief. Check out my videos on the subject over at my YouTube channel, Ratherby Squidding, and stay tuned to KGRA-DB and the Unidentified Celebrity Review. When Santa shows his face, or we learn the fate of the government's nascent UFO programs, you'll hear it here first.
Welcome back to Night Vision. We are here with John Kachuba, author and creative writing instructor at Ohio University. That's what I need. I need a writing instructor. What I need is somebody to tell me how to actually sit and focus. I've got like a couple of books in me that I just can't quite get out. It's that same problem I had with the remote viewing. I'm like all over the place. But anyhow, so I did want to get in a little bit into your haunted houses and your haunted locations, especially since it did kind of trigger you into the field of shapeshifter research. Have you been to mostly haunted places in the United States?
Yeah, primarily, yeah. And a lot of it's been in the Midwest here where I live, obviously. I have 2 books about ghost hunting in Ohio, one in Illinois, so there's 3 there. I did another one that was national in scope called Ghost Hunters. And there's some places in Florida, North Carolina, New Mexico, kind of scattered locations. But I've also done some abroad, the Philippines, Malta, some places like that too. So yeah.
Wow.
But, yeah, I find the ghost stories really very interesting, and
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And what is your most compelling experience in one of these locations?
Yeah, wow. Every time somebody asks me that, it's like, well, it's going to change this week, but I think, yeah. Well, one that I really remembered a lot actually occurred in Brooksville, Florida, and it was at a house called the May Stringer House, and it was built Victorian era. The guy who built it was a doctor, and his wife died in childbirth, giving birth to a daughter. I forgot what the daughter's name was, but she lived till she was about 3. And then she died from something, either cholera or yellow fever. This was back like in the 1880s, 1870s. One of these diseases that took so many children that today we don't even worry about,
Right. Because they got vaccinated.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, yeah. Right. Well, yeah, exactly.
Don't come after me, people.
Well,
I got my vaccination the first chance I got.
I did too, and you're 100% right on that. But so there was hauntings going on there where they thought that the little girl was there. The house now is the Historical Society, the County Historical Society, and it's all furnished with all Victorian furniture everywhere inside. And so they had these toys that they would put in they had like a kind of a curio cabinet form, and they were these heavy kind of cast iron toys from the old days, and they put them in there. And they'd come back in the morning and they would find the toys scattered all around the house, on the stairs in different rooms. Who was there? They found a cradle, a little doll cradle for a doll that was broken one day. Pieces were scattered around. This is when the docents would come back in the morning and unlock. And the whole place had a security system too.
They would come in and they would find this stuff?
Yeah, I come back in the morning after locking up at night, setting the alarm, going out at night, and nobody else in the building. I come back in the morning and things would be all over the place. It's like, well, okay, who's doing that? So they thought it was the little girl that was doing this, and I cannot remember her name. It's unfortunate, but it's in one of my books anyway. It's in Ghost Hunters, I think. But I was invited by the supervisor of this place to come in and do an investigation there, because she said we have so much activity. Besides those kinds of things that I mentioned, people were seeing at night, again, after the place was closed and locked up, they would see like silhouettes in the window, like moving back and forth. They called the police. The police would come. They'd get into the building. Nobody was there. So there was a lot of things like that going on. So they they called me and asked me to do an investigation. And I showed up and I spent the night there, myself, the supervisor, and another ghost hunter from Tampa. And really nothing was going on. But the house was unbelievably quiet. It was like just really abnormally quiet. Yeah, really. I mean, it's like right across the street from the house was this biker bar, and it had neon lights all over the place and bikes roaring up and down the street, music blasting, and you can hear it out in the porch. And then you go in the house, you hear nothing. And this is an old house. It was just so weird. And that was one thing that we remarked upon, like, how weird. This is so quiet. But we spent the whole night and nothing happened. The house was dark. We'd go into one room and, we'd wait and nothing was going on. So we decided, okay, this is kind of a bust. Let's just leave it. A lot of times you do these investigations for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
And nothing happens. Actually, that's more common than not, is nothing happens. Right. But so we decided to leave. So the supervisor says, well, I have to set the alarms on the doors. So she's doing that. So now we have to go out to the kitchen, to the back door. So the kitchen has, again, all these Victorian appliances there. There's this wood-burning stove. And the stove has a big round iron disc on it, a flat disc. And it's got like this eye bolt attached and a handle that's probably 18 inches long, and it's iron. And the idea was that you would pick up, when the stove got hot, you'd grab that handle, lift up that lid and throw more wood in and then put it down again. You only had about 10 seconds to do it because everything was hot, all iron. So this thing is laying totally across the top of the stove, and it's attached to the eyeball. It's dark. We have one flashlight, and the three of us are walking past this thing. And as we walk by it, we see it. All three of us see it. That long 18-inch, whatever it is, arm or handle, if you want to call it, it flips up, right? It does a 180, but it does it quickly and with violence. It just goes bam. It flaps over on the lid. It hits the lid so hard that it actually pops off the eyeball and falls on the floor, right? And we stood there and we just said, "Did you see that?" That's about all you can say. Of course we saw it, But meanwhile, we put our cameras away, our recorders away, because we were leaving. So there was nothing. But the supervisor said, well, I guess the ghost was here and she was just, saying goodbye to you. But it was so incredible because, there's been other places where I've been where somebody said, did you see that thing move? And maybe there was a slight, tiny little movement of something, like a little jar or something, just kind of a little inch,
right,
something like that. You say, well, it could have been anything. It could have been somebody hitting the table or something. But here was a case where we weren't touching anything, just walking by it, and it was a big metal bar that just flipped and hard. I mean, if your hand was on there, you'd have felt it.
That would have taken some force.
A lot of force. Oh yeah, I mean, it's slammed.
Cast iron is heavy, very
heavy, and it, like I said, it flipped up very quickly, obviously, and with great force. It just flipped right over. And so, something like that happens, and you don't know how to explain that. There are people who right away would say, well, it's got to be a ghost. Well, I'm not ready to go that far. I could say that it defies every law of physics, everything that I know, every science that I know on Earth, it defies all that. Does that mean that it was a ghost doing it necessarily? Well, no. Something happened. I saw it, I witnessed it, and it still creeps me out because I know it couldn't have happened, but it did.
I wonder, in researching that house, did you research the geology of the land? I wonder if it was like on a ley line or.
You're right. No, I didn't. That's interesting because, people do talk about ley lines and electromagnetic areas and things like that can cause things, or underground water. I mean, there's a lot of different things that, a lot of geological factors that could affect something like that. I remember being in a hotel in California at one point. I was in the room, and all of a sudden I heard something kind of vibrating, I said, what is it? And I looked and I saw the TV on the stand was kind of shaking like this, right? And all of a sudden there was a lamp next to it, a table lamp. And that thing suddenly did a hop, skip, and a jump, like a foot. And I went, oh, well, what happened was there was an earthquake.
Oh.
and I didn't know it. And the only thing that I could feel, or I didn't even feel anything, I just saw the effects of it. And people in California who are there all, my friends in California say, oh yeah, that's typical. You'll see something like that. Something will move, but you won't feel anything else, or your whole house will move,
Yeah.
So there are things like that, but this was just, I don't know. I don't know how to explain it.
An experience recently with an earthquake that did seem a little strange. As a lot of my listeners know, I lost one of my very, very dearest and closest pals on Easter Sunday this year. She unexpectedly passed away. And that night, I just couldn't sleep. And so I was up. It was in the middle of the night. I had no idea, what time it was or anything. And I was, I had been, messaging with friends and, trying to watch something on YouTube or something, just very, very upset. And all of a sudden, the bed starts rocking and, I'm sitting on the edge of the bed and, the dogs look up and I said, oh my goodness, it's an earthquake. And my first thought was to yell, okay, Gloria, who was my friend who had passed away. And then I laughed at myself and, went on from there. So a few minutes later, I'd already talked myself out of, the idea that my friend had anything to do with it. But I looked on YouTube and there was a video that had been posted by one of the local news channels here in Los Angeles. And it said, sea anchors react to earthquake, a few minutes ago. And I thought, oh, that'll be fun to see, watch the news anchors, diving for the desk, under the desk. And so I clicked on the video and the guy says, oh, we've just experienced an earthquake here in Los Angeles at exactly 4:44 a.m. And I nearly fell off the bed because that was like a secret message that we used to send each other all the time. Anytime I would see the clock on 4:44 here, I would just send her a text message that said 4:44, and she did the same. And every time, she was on East Coast time, so when it was 4:44 there, she would text me. And the earthquake happened at exactly 4:44. Wow. And I said, wait a minute, maybe she did have something to do with it.
Well,
knowing her and knowing how she knew me, because I'm such a hardhead, and she's always the one that's always on the spiritual side and the intuitive side and all that, and I'm always questioning everything. And so I thought, that would be like her to do something, like hit me over the head with a sledgehammer or, cause an earthquake in order that I would actually get it. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. Could it be a coincidence? Yes. But my goodness.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, we read into all those kinds of things and maybe there's something there, we don't know.
I just realized something, John. I had put in some questions to you from someone in the chat room, and I think I just figured out who it was. I think it was Amanda Curran, and here at KGRH, and she is the one who put me in contact with you.
I was
going to acknowledge her at the end of the show anyway, but I didn't know she was sitting in there. Hi, Amanda. Yeah. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for the great guest. We appreciate it.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, she's great. So, yep, that's her, she says. Good deal.
Yep, it's me.
All right, I'm glad she made it. So, anyhow, so back in your haunted adventures, so what type of investigation do you actually do? Are you in there with the equipment, all the meters and everything, or is it more like your own experience of a of a site.
Yeah. So when I started doing started writing the books and started doing this, I went in as a journalist. So, which meant basically I had a notebook and a pen.
Right.
I carried a camera, and I carried a recorder, some kind of a pocket recorder or something. That was it, because I wasn't going in as a sort of diehard paranormal investigator. I was going in as somebody who's saying, this is an interesting phenomena.
Yes.
What is going on here? And I was interested in the stories of the people that were at these places, what they were experiencing, and whatever too. So I was doing all that. But what happened was, after I started doing a few places on my own, I don't know if word got out or whatever, that, hey, some guy's writing a book, but I started getting invitations from a lot of different ghost hunting groups. And they'd say, hey, we're going to go look at this restaurant tonight. Are you interested in coming? And I'd say, well, yeah, okay. So I team up with them for that particular evening or whatever. And those people would have, all kinds of stuff. They have, infrared things. They have all kinds of laser devices and recorders. And
Wow.
I remember I teamed up with a group in Connecticut to investigate a coffee house, turn of the century coffee house. And I got there with myself and my, couple little pocket items, and they pulled up in 2 vans, and it took them probably an hour to unload. I mean, they had like steamer trucks, and they roll them off, and they had all kinds of stuff. And I helped them. They would show me what to do, but we ended up basically like wiring this building. There was stuff everywhere. We had cameras set up. We had motion detectors. We had heat sensors. We had all kinds of stuff. They even had some kind of Navy surplus, like an oscilloscope or something that would, if something was moving around a room, it would show it like radar almost.
Yes, I've seen those.
Yeah. So
I forget what they're called, but yeah.
Yeah. So they had all those things. And I find that fascinating, they have all that kind of gear. And a lot of the groups that I work with, to varying degrees, but they all had something, certainly more than I had. But even when I worked with some of those groups, though, what I would do is I'd hang around with them while we're setting all this stuff up, and I'd look at the monitors with them and everything too. But I would always try to go off someplace in that structure, whatever it was. I'd always try to go off someplace by myself, and just go in a room or something somewhere and just sit down and just quiet. And just, I have a meditative practice. I meditate every day. So what I would do is basically sort of a meditation, believing that by lowering sort of all the conscious restrictions that I put on myself every day about what you can think about, what you can't think about, what you can do, if I can get rid of all that, just sort of open my mind up, just sort of be like a vessel, that if there was anything out there, it would be able to make contact probably more easily. I always thought all the equipment and stuff was distracting. You're sitting there for hours, sometimes just looking at a monitor.
Yeah.
And while you're doing that, a ghost is walking behind you. So.
True. Yeah, I think it would be a good idea, to go in and just sit and experience the site.
Yeah.
Maybe before all the activity with the equipment and electronics can come in. But I know some of those are quite amazing. We have a couple, and you reminded me of them when you mentioned the Philippines. Tony and Cherie Rathman. Cherie's from the Philippines, and they have a show on this network as well. And they have the absolute most amazing, I know they call them Frank boxes or ghost boxes.
Yeah.
That record, but he calls his Evox, and it's something that he built. And I've never heard anything quite as incredible as the one that he has. And there are things that come across there that are just too amazing to be just a coincidence.
Yeah.
In fact, I was going to suggest, and Amanda's on the job too. She said maybe I could give your name to them. I absolutely will give your name to Tony and Cherie. You'll love them also. They do a lot of investigations, and you might find some of their material interesting. But Cherie's from the Philippines, and they've done a lot there as well. And there are some pretty haunted places, or at least they've gotten a lot of activity. But they seem to get a lot, just about everywhere they go. Another thing that they do is when requested and feasible, they will go, to someone's house that's having a problem, especially if they've got kids and they're being bothered by what's going on.
Yeah.
And they'll go and help them. Have you done or been on any of those kind of trips?
No, everything that I did, I made a point of doing only places that were open to the public, available to the public. I deliberately made a choice not to do any, work in private homes or anything. That gets to be really complicated, and it's pretty, you can affect somebody's life if you're wrong or not doing it properly. And so I thought, no, I don't have that kind of training. I mean, to me, I'm thinking that's more psychology and whatever, and that's not.
Yeah.
So I would go to places like, haunted hotels, libraries, restaurants, stores. I mean, you name it, any kind of haunted location, as long as it's someplace that was accessible and the public could go to as well.
Yeah, some historical site or something like that.
Historical sites,
we went to Lizzie Borden, then we did the Queen Mary and that sort of thing. So I totally get that. Yeah, it is something, I think you would want to be careful about. I mean, you are messing around in someone's life.
Right.
It's like, years ago, I trained to be a hypnotherapist because I was interested in the phenomena of people reporting that they've been abducted by aliens.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized that it kind of wasn't the greatest tool, because if you're researching UFOs or aliens, then, by the very nature of hypnosis, the subject will want to give you information about UFOs and aliens. So, maybe if you could go in there just as a mental health person who also does hypnosis, who has no ties to, or to any thesis at all, maybe you could get a better, more true outcome. But there's also the real danger of confabulation in hypnosis, and then memory hardening. If there's a suggestion or they feel there's a suggestion and then they say, oh yeah, and then they'll confabulate a memory, and then it just becomes like in stone for them, and it's just, they see it as a real memory. So I didn't find it to be quite as useful, and never really did too much with it. But I think that might be part and parcel of the same thing. Ooh, Amanda's asking you if you've ever witnessed a possession.
No. I can say that categorically.
I'm having on a Monsignor from the Catholic Church who is an exorcist. So next week's show will be on exorcisms. Right. So save those questions.
Well, I knew Ed and Lorraine Warren. I grew up in Connecticut, and in fact, I lived in Monroe, Connecticut for a while, which is the same town they lived in. And I know they did a lot of that kind of work. Going to homes, but also a lot of exorcisms and things like that, because they were very steeply involved in, or not involved in, but very staunch, Roman Catholic believers. So for them, it was a lot of the paranormal stuff was God versus the devil.
Right. The battle between good and evil.
Yeah. And I never looked at it that way. I always thought the paranormal was, well, I don't know what it is for sure, but if ghosts exist, they are, I'm gathering, probably the essential energy or spirit or soul, whatever you want to call it, that we all have, and that is still here for some reason. But I always thought, well, if your uncle was a really great, kind, generous, loving person, and he dies, and he's a ghost, why would he become some kind of a demon? That doesn't make any sense. He would still be a kind, generous, loving soul, but now without his body.
Right.
So I kind of, I took a more simplistic approach, I think, to it than the Warrens did.
Do you think that there is something in a haunting where people, see images of individuals? Sometimes they are translucent, sometimes they look as solid as we do, but they're obviously, from another time. Do you think that could be something like a remnant of like electrical energy, rather than that person's actually coming in there, and still walking around? It's just they've left that pattern, that residual energy, whatever it is.
Right. And they call it a residual haunting. And,
right.
Yeah. And the idea is that everything is energy. Everything is energy. That somehow energy, if you will, from an event or from a person leaves literally a psychic impression in the environment. And then it lasts for a while. And then at some point, it just dissipates. You hear stories a lot, like especially from England. It's got a much longer history than us. You hear about, a castle, a night ghost that is in the castle, right? And people will say, well, we've seen it for hundreds of years. And then after a while, they say, well, we don't see it anymore. And so what I'm thinking, something like that is probably that kind of a case where you're not really seeing, I'll call it a spirit or an entity. What you're seeing is like almost like a movie.
Right.
You're seeing, you're seeing the energy or whatever from that time that leaves this impression, and over time will eventually just transform into some other form of energy, and it'll be gone.
Right. It's like a hologram.
Kind of like a hologram. Yeah.
It looks like it's there, but it's really just an image.
Right.
Then, of course, you do have cases where people seem to be able to communicate. I rarely see, or I don't know if I've ever seen anyone communicating with an entity that they're also seeing right there or have right there on camera. But like when they're just talking to the room and they've got the equipment on, and it will pick up what sounds like specific, answers to their specific questions.
Right.
I've seen that happen, and it's quite amazing. So I wonder if they're two completely different things. Like the visual thing is like a projection, but is it possible that we still are able to communicate with people that have left this earth?
Right. I've worked with a lot of, I'll call them psychics. Sometimes they call themselves mediums, sometimes psychics, or they're more specific and say they're clairvoyant, which means they can see ghosts, or clairaudient, they can hear them, or clairsentient, they can feel them, or all three. And a lot of times these different ghost groups that I've worked with would have somebody like that would be there too. And I remember very clearly a couple of cases where there's one guy who I respect. I respect his abilities, and we'd go into a place, and he'd walk around for a while, and then he would start saying, "Okay, I'm seeing a old gentleman sitting here in the corner." Now, I'm not seeing an old gentleman sitting in the corner, but my friend is.
Right.
And he would also be able to say that he could relate to. He can communicate with him. Well, the old man says that he's sick and he needs his medicine, or whatever.
Right.
So this psychic or this medium is having this conversation and also able to see him, where the rest of us are not. We're taking his word for it. And of course, that also opens up the door to just fraud, right? I mean, I know this guy. I trust him. He's done some other things that I know he's not a fraud.
Right.
But you can easily walk into a room. I can walk into a room right now and say, I see a guy there and he's talking to me. And,
Sure.
right? I mean, who's going to say I'm not, right? But sometimes you get these things and what they come up with matches so much of what, as you say, may have been the actual history of a place, or that seems to fit that situation in some way. And I can give you an example. It wasn't so much a psychic, but it was an EVP, electronic voice phenomenon, something we just pick up on a recorder, but you don't hear it until you play back. And I was doing an investigation at what used to be called the Athens Lunatic Asylum, and it's in Athens, Ohio. It's now part of Ohio University. And I always say, considering my students there, it seems appropriate that it was a lunatic asylum. But
Just so they're not saying that about you.
that's right. But I was doing an investigation. There was this old building called the Ridges that was a huge building, and it was nicknamed the Ridges, but it was the Athens Lunatic Asylum. But it was closed. The university owned it, but they only had one floor that was open, and it was like an art museum. The rest was all closed for security reasons. It had asbestos and bad floors, and the whole building needed an overhaul. It was going to take millions of dollars. But anyway, there were artists that had some studios there, and they also taught at the university, and they were talking about seeing shadows and people walking around and hearing voices, and it wasn't any of them at night when they were working there. So they asked me to come in and do some work there. And one of the things that we did is I worked with a team that I put together, and we had recorders all over the place and things like that. And we did put a recorder down in a room in the basement. And the basement was where they had rooms for people who were in danger of hurting themselves or hurting others. So literally, the padded cells,
Wow.
the violent people. We had a recorder. We put it in the room, let it run. We closed the door. We went around for a couple more hours, and then we broke down everything and, called it a night. So we went back and we listened to all the recorders and looked at all the video that we had taken, and we weren't getting much. But as we were listening to the recorder in this particular room, that basement room, all we hear for the longest time is just white noise, just there's nothing there. And then all of a sudden in the middle of that, we hear, "Would you help us?" Just like that. This whispered voice. Yeah, that's what we said. Exactly what we said. It was said, "Would you help us?" And it was clear as a bell. I mean, sometimes they hear these EVPs, somebody will say, "Well, it sounded like he said, help me." And somebody will say, "No, you don't know." But this was clear. Everybody said, "I know what they said." Wow. And again, if you think about the situation, it makes sense, logically. I mean, if you think about the people who were there locked up, these poor folks, who didn't want to be there and had issues, and it would make sense that if somebody was there and saw you there, he'd say, "Help me, get me out of here. Would you help us?" I mean, so you get those kinds of things that, you say, yeah, that's a hit. That was right on,
Yeah. There's just no question.
Right.
On that one. Oh, yeah. I've heard some pretty amazing things on EVP that just defy explanation, really.
Right.
But, now, would that have been a communication, or would that have been residual?
That's a good point.
It's possible that there are souls that, didn't cross over for some reason, didn't know they were dead, or had a score to settle before they go, or something like that. Or is that just because that is something that at the time they would have felt also?
Right. And to your point, we didn't stay there in that room and talk to the darkness and ask if there was anything there. We just, we put the recorder in and said, this would be a good place.
Yeah.
And we just turned around and left. So that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but it could very well have been a residual memory or something. Maybe that's playing all the time. Maybe, I don't know.
Could be.
It's interesting.
It almost seems like, because with the visual stuff, it seems like you do see a particular character going through the same motions.
Right.
They'll go be in the same rooms, or they'll walk from this to the fireplace, and that they always do that, or they always come down the stairs. It's almost like a repeat, like a loop,
Yeah.
a recording loop, something like that. And I think we just don't know enough about energy and ourselves as energetic beings. I mean, we are electrical, and then I think there's just a lot we don't know. And, it may not be supernatural. It may just be natural and scientific. I don't know. But,
right. Well, I mean, physics and Einstein told us, right, that all the energy in the universe is constant. You can't create it, you can't destroy it, but you can transform it from one form to another, right?
Right.
So that's science. So what happens to the energy that's us when we die? Well, we know we literally do push up daisies. I mean, part of us at least is going to be carbon atoms, or we're going to push up daisies. We know that. But is there a possibility that maybe some little fraction of whatever energy is us goes somewhere else or becomes something else? The Buddhists kind of talk about, it may not be a term they use, but I think the idea of a cosmic mind. In other words, the mind is not in here, but it's out here somewhere, and that we all tap into it. And actually, some neuroscientists today are doing research in that very idea, that the mind is not within us, but is without, and that it's like one big cloud. It's like the iCloud. Everything's in the cloud. Well, our mind could be the cloud too. So if that's the case, when we die, does part of us maybe connect with that cosmic mind? And if that's the case, is there consciousness? Is there of some form of existence in some way? So, I mean, that gets really into quantum physics and, whatever else, I guess. But, I mean, I always think that might be the possibility of what ghosts might be.
Right. So do you have a personal opinion or idea based on your own beliefs on what the afterlife is, or is that pretty much it?
Well,
I don't. It's an afterlife. Maybe there is no afterlife.
Yeah, right. That's right, and I think that's where I'm not sure.
Oh, I think John froze. Maybe Bill can fix us up. Producer Bill.
No.
There we go.
There we
you
go.
were frozen.
Okay. Yeah, I saw that.
Time. We were talking. You got frozen in time there for a minute.
Well, so the question was the afterlife, right?
Yes.
So I'm of two minds. I mean, I would certainly like to believe that maybe somehow our consciousness goes on, and we're there. If there's nothing else, if it's just the end, I'm okay with that too, really. I mean, but I don't take the religious bent of there's a heaven and a hell, and
right.
I don't buy that. I don't know why that would be,
Well,
So
it wasn't really invented until the New Testament anyway.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
So,
right.
What about all those people that died before that?
Yeah. So I'm not sure, but I think this whole idea of energy in the mind and things like that makes me think that there might still be something else, but that might just be wishful thinking too. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly is wishful thinking on my part. I really kind of hate to think about the light just being turned out, and that was it.
Yeah.
It's hard to accept that, especially, when you've lost loved ones,
yeah.
And then also when you're thinking about your own, when we are kind of egotistical beings,
Yeah, you start reaching a certain age.
The world without us, But yeah, it's anybody's guess as far as I'm concerned. But I was raised in Southern Baptist household, and although my parents weren't as strict as my aunts and uncles and grandparents, we were still, up in the church house every Sunday morning and Sunday night and Wednesday nights too for prayer meeting, a lot of times vacation Bible school in the summer times. But even then I was just thinking, I'm not sure if this is all there is here. I'm just not sure. And then, when I got a little bit older and started reading about all kinds of other philosophies and people who just have a non-philosophy about religion. It's just there's so much information out there. It's really hard to then go back and I don't want to insult anyone's faith, and I certainly know that people's personal faith can get them through some bad times, and I wouldn't want to yank that or even try to damage that in any way. But for myself, it's just I think a lot differently these days. After a long time of reading other stuff, studying other things and meeting other cultures and things like that. It's like it doesn't make sense that there's just this one small way that, you can have, salvation or eternal life. It doesn't really square with the whole idea. To me, if there's something available in that way, it has to be available for everyone, not just someone that has heard and believes this one story,
Right.
But,
Right.
oh yeah, we got Amanda on here quoting Chris Hitchens. What does she say here? It's worse than someone just telling you the party is over. Oh no, the party will continue, but you still have to leave.
Yes, have to leave. Yeah.
That's absolutely true. I want everything to come to a screeching halt, when I go. It's like I'm going to be really angry.
Right.
No, that's not true. In fact, quite the opposite. I, just keep on trucking. I don't know what happens after I'm gone.
I always wonder, I always say you won't know when you're dead, right?
Well, we don't know. We won't know.
Well, we don't know.
We won't know.
But I always think of it as, you go to sleep at night, you don't know what goes on, then you wake up in the morning, right?
Right.
So what happens at all? I mean, I kind of vision it that way. Like, well, you go to sleep and, you don't know.
Yeah.
So maybe it's not bad. Who knows?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe it's going to be a whole new ball game, and it's going to be wonderful. I don't know. Hopefully, it's not going to be the same. More of the same.
Right. Just want to come back like Groundhog Day.
I've had enough of this. But what Amanda's saying? How did you feel before you were born? I have absolutely no idea.
Wow,
that's a deep question. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, but I have heard that people, have been regressed into their time in the womb and before. So if hypnosis really does work, then that might be a way to find out. I'm just not sure about that. So what is your plan going forward? Are you going to continue to do investigations into paranormal sites? What's the next book that's coming? Or do you have one, or is that a bad question? It's like,
no,
don't think about it.
Yeah. No, it's not a bad question. It's just there's so much. So when I travel, I mean, I like history, but I also really like looking into the paranormal stuff. So hopefully there's more travel in the future. And when I travel, it'll be definitely part of it is looking into paranormal sites. So I'll continue to do that. I don't really have a book in mind just yet, although the Shapeshifters book made me think that there might be something even further to go into with that. I think what interests me about the Shapeshifter is the psychology kind of behind it. Why is the character so popular? we touched on a little bit earlier when you were saying that, it's like you wish for superpowers or whatever, things like that. But I think there's something even more basic than that, maybe. So I might be interested in looking at that a little bit more. But I'm also working on other projects that have
some kind of animal instinct or something like that.
I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure I'd call it instinct. I don't know yet. I haven't written the book yet.
You got to write the book first, and you'll know.
When I write it, I'll let you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have all the answers. No, I don't know. But I'm working on other projects too. So
another question from the chat room.
Yeah.
If you could investigate any location throughout time, where would you go and why?
Throughout time. Wow. Boy, that's a good question.
Now, does that mean time traveling and paranormal investigation?
Yeah, that's.
How about any location?
Well,
whether
actually,
it's historical or.
Yeah, I mean, actually, places I haven't been to, as I haven't been anywhere in Great Britain, like Stonehenge or any of those places. I'd be interested in going to those kinds of places that are more going back to ancient times, almost before sort of the classical civilizations,
right.
Greek and Rome, going back to, well, almost like that Neolithic stuff that we started off with earlier,
Right.
I'm not sure what locations that would be. I think Great Britain would be probably a place for that, somewhere in England or Scotland or Ireland. I don't know.
I have friends that have some great paranormal investigation groups over there. So I don't know if you have a team over there already, but
No.
In fact, all my viewers and listeners know James Martin, who is our resident historian here on this show. And in fact, last week he was on and he had, I don't know if you call her a psychic. She's more of an expert in witchcraft, but she's also has her own psychic abilities. But she's getting her master's in history right now, and that's her thesis is on the history of witches. And they have a group, and they know all the castles and all the sites, and which ones are most, active, and which ones are most scary. But there's so many of them. You won't be at a shortage of.
No, yeah. Right, for sure.
If nothing else. So, yeah, I've been thinking about maybe doing some paranormal investigation down in France in some of those old castle ruins or old Knight Templar places. We were in a castle the last time I was there, which I was just there a couple months back. I was there for a little extended period of time. And on one of the days we were over in this castle, and then there was a strange image over me in the photograph that we could never figure out what it was, or there was no place for reflection or anything like that, but it was like this shield over me. It was very strange.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice. I've been wanting to get Tony Rassman and Cherie over there with their Evox and see if we can get anybody talking to us over there. Of course, I'm gonna have to brush up on my French. Because I would imagine they would all be speaking in French if there were any spirits there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so now you had been to a couple locations in France already, right? Or is it just one?
Yeah. Quite a few.
Oh, really? Did you go to any of the other caves, like in Lascaux or any of those?
No, I didn't get up there. I went to the Paris catacombs.
Oh, yeah. Now that's a weird.
Oh, man.
I've not been in there. I'm not sure I would like to. We shot there on a TV show I was working on, Ripley's Believe It or Not. Okay. And there was a kid who used to ride a skateboard on his stomach, and he would go all through the catacombs. And so we filmed that. I didn't go in. But I don't know if he's still doing that. He's probably like 50 by now.
Well, so when I did Shapeshifters, I was in, for research, I was in France, Portugal, a little bit of northern Italy, Belarus, Ukraine, and Romania.
Well, of
So
course, you had to go.
yeah, one side and the other side. Middle Europe I didn't bother with. I went, but so when I was in France, went up to Paris and we did go into the catacombs and took a tour in there. And the day before we went in there was a newspaper article about 2 teenage boys who were rescued from the catacombs. So, there's this one public entrance that you can go into and you take a tour, but there's a lot of other entrances that are closed up or hidden that people know how to get in and out of if you're there, and these boys apparently got into one of these entrances in the catacombs and wandered around in there and got lost. And they were missing for 5 days. And, no one knew where they were. The police finally got some body sniffing dogs to go down there and stuff. They found the boys. They were alive. They're 2 teenagers, but they were suffering from like hypothermia because the average temperature is something like 50 degrees in there or lower. They had no food. They had no water. They're totally lost. But you hear stories about people getting lost in there. And this is not the first time. But it was so ironic because here we were going to the next day. And we just hear about these 2 kids who were just rescued the day before,
Now, going in there, I know you were on a tour, so you probably were being led around. But
no. See, that's the great thing about the tour. What they do is they take small groups at a time, like maybe 20 at a time. So we were online for 2 hours just to get in. They take you, I think, about 20. They bring you into this little room, and they tell you about the little bit of the history and stuff. And there's little displays you can look at. Then they say, okay, there's follow the arrows, and you're on your own. Oh. So no one's leading you anywhere. And you keep following the arrows. Hopefully get to the end.
Could you see, were there places where you could go off course if you wanted to and get lost? Or
there were. I mean, there were some places that, would have like a barricade or something and say, no trespassing or whatever. But if you really wanted to, you could probably get through there. Yeah. But I forgot how many miles. I think, believe it or not, I think the catacombs, the whole system, I think it's something like 100 miles, which seems weird, right, under Paris. But the part that's actually open to the public that you go through, it may not even be a mile. But, because it's winding and all that kind of stuff. But even then, you can see these offshoots from there. And then, like I say, all these other parts of the catacombs, there's no access at all to the public. But some people know how to get into them.
Is the whole thing full of skulls?
Well, not just skulls, all kinds of bones.
All kinds of bones.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
They're, but I mean, even in the restricted areas, do you get the impression that it's all bones under there?
Oh yeah, I forgot how many people there's like 1 million or something or more people that are, what they did was as Paris was expanding, growing, the city was growing, it was eventually going out to the cemeteries that were on the fringes. So they needed the room, but also there was a lot of disease and everything because the cemeteries weren't being taken care of very well. And also basically what they did is they took, I think there may be 5 or 6 or even more cemeteries from around Paris. They just dug up everybody, just dug them all up, and they put them into the catacombs.
Oh my goodness!
So you have maybe 7 cemeteries or something, whatever it was, that had been.
Before that happened, there were already bones in there, right? They just used that repository to also, or is that how the catacombs originated?
No, it wasn't. No, they were made as a repository for these bones that they dug up out of the cities. Yeah, it wasn't like if you go to like if you go to Rome. Like I was in Rome and I went to the catacombs there, and those are actual. They were built as burial places.
Yeah. And isn't there like a church in Budapest where it's full of bones and skulls?
Yeah, where is that? It's somewhere in Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
I saw a photo of it. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah. Now you said you went to Ukraine and Belarus.
Yeah.
Did you
Nobody
have?
goes to Belarus.
You know what? I think according to my 23andMe, I may be part Belarusian.
Oh, is that right?
Well, a lot of the people that have similar DNA profiles came from that area. So
Okay.
I don't know how long ago, but I've got a little bit of everything. So
Well, I'm half Ukrainian, so that was part of that.
oh, very interesting.
Ukrainian, not Belarusian.
Right. Now, so you did you go to particular locations in Ukraine? Like, did you have something set up that you were going to go check out already?
Not so much in Ukraine. I was in two cities. I was in Kiev, the capital. I'm trying to think what the other city was. Lviv, Western Ukraine. Two beautiful cities. I was there more for my own benefit, trying to get some family history and things like that. But there was a connection. So in Belarus, there was, according to legend, there was a prince. Well, there was a prince named Veslev in Belarus. And the legend says that that Veslev was a werewolf. And the story is that he would raid into what is today Ukraine, and he'd burn churches and stuff, and he'd steal things, typical raiding kind of things.
Yeah.
And he'd bring it back. And he built this cathedral in a town in Belarus called Polotsk. And it's Saint Sophia. It's a beautiful, beautiful cathedral.
Ooh.
He built it, and he put all these rich kind of decorative things in it that he had stolen from places in Ukraine. But people said that he did this as a werewolf.
Oh gosh.
They said, well, and there's this legend, there's this ancient poem that talks about Veslev, and it's like Veslev's night ride or something like that. And it talks about how he transformed into a wolf to be able to get to Belarus and Ukraine quickly, because werewolves, according to this poem, have incredible speed, supernatural speed, not just wolf speed, but supernatural. So he's able to do that and raid the place and steal stuff and then run back to Belarus and put it back in his church. So I went to his church and I, took a picture of his statue and everything else. So yeah, I would go to these places that had kind of connection.
Well, I'm getting the hook here from Bill, our producer. I got so enthralled with what we were talking about that I've run over time. So he says, please wrap. I said, yes, I will wrap. Anyhow, thank you so much, John, for coming on. I want to put up your website again so that people can give it a look-see and check out your books and maybe send you a message. And also, if anyone wants to get hold of me, please write to me at info@newrennies.org. We've been working on our website, and we will be launching some new material up there very, very shortly, not only from James and I, but also from contributors. So give us a look when you get a chance in the next week or so, and we should have some new material up there for you. So thank you, everyone, especially you, John.
Thank you, Renee. It's been a lot of fun.
Appreciate it so much. All right, everyone. Good night. Take care of yourselves. Good night.